Book one was all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. She is the author of the upcoming book, The Sufferfest: How Sex, Drugs, and Triathlon Saved My Life. None other than Miss Margie Allman.
Hi, how are you?
I'm fabulous and excellent, Miss Margie. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I miss?
Well, I'm 61 years old now. My journey has been a lifelong journey from being born one of those kids that didn't know how to handle their emotions. I was very anxious and fearful and um, just just had a difficult time. They gave me Ritalin when I was about 3 or 4 years old, which had an adverse effect. And my parents had a hard time with me because they were conservative Christian people who believed if you did everything by the book, then everything would be okay. And it didn't really work out that way for me. Um, I had an okay childhood, but I got heavily into drugs and trouble when I was in my early teens. And uh, my parents chose to put me in a place called Straight Incorporated, which is back in the troubled teen industry's heyday of um, telling parents that they could fix their kids. So they're aggressive attack therapy type of place. You're stripped down and allowed no contact with the outside world, or talking, or listening to music, or you have to ask permission to go to the bathroom. They use sleep and food deprivation to coerce you to get in touch with your feelings. It's about tough love. Um, I don't know if I was born with low self esteem, but for someone like me that had no self esteem, this was a particularly detrimental kind of place for me. So I was there from the time I was 16 to 18, and I did succeed. I had several forward and backs. And when I turned 18, I just wanted to leave, which was when they used physical abuse on me in that place called Straight. And they put me in isolation. And that's when I had always been an active kid, but that's when I really discovered started using exercise as a coping mechanism. They put me in a room with peanut butter and water, peanut butter bread and water for a week. And I didn't have a clock, I didn't have any book, nothing. So I just started exercising, and it carried over into the rest of my life. And I'm thankful for that. What I've learned from it, I didn't know this at the time, but apparently it gave me something to have control over. And now I understand its place in my whole life. Is It was something that I could control and accomplish goals. So anyway, so I was in that room, and then they terminated me, which is a bad thing. And my parents were so into the place that they dropped me off at the Florida airport and said, "See you later." And after 2 years of those formative years, when I got out, I had no social skills. I did not know hardly how to order food in a public place, or even go to the bathroom without permission. So I I really skidded downward in my. Uh, I was 18 at that time. And I bounced around. I went into a halfway house to try to learn living skills. But they keep you pretty isolated in the rehab world. So it was really hard for me to adjust to normal life, much like you hear prisoners talk about. And so I got involved in a lot of survival behaviors. And in my book, I talk about all this downward spiral into heavier into drugs and stripping and prostitution. And I kept exercising, so, and I still see that as kind of a lifeline for me. I would still go for a run, and that made me feel good. I did weightlifting, and I always had that as a vice when I was feeling really bad about myself that I knew would make me feel good about myself. Um, so what I've learned about chronic or complex PTSD is when you're young or whenever traumatic events happen, we respond to the traumatic events in ways that create more trauma. And so the shame and guilt and remorse that started to build up for me became kind of a hamster wheel, because I was now convinced I was a horrible person, and that I would do something that affirmed it. And I would, at a point in life where I just said, well, that's just me. I'm just a loser. And then I moved to Los Angeles, and I got to cocaine and heavy addiction there that I blame for getting me toxic shock syndrome. Um, and I survived that, but that's was a major turning point for me. I couldn't walk when I got out of the hospital to the end of the block. My blood pressure had been 30 over 50 when I was admitted in the hospital. And I realized I did not want to live a life or die, but I couldn't live that way anymore. And the first job I got was in a Pilates studio. And fortunately for me, I took to that immediately. And I was ready for my life to have something else fill it up, not just drugs and my erratic behavior. So at the time, it was the best thing that could have happened to me to get a job at a Pilates studio. I became an instructor. It was the first time in my life I believed I had something to offer and I had a purpose, and I met a great group of supportive women. And I will say I've always had someone, much of my life was my sister, always there to love me back. And so I've never been completely desolate and alone. Truly, I felt that way, but there was always somebody encouraging me and cheerleading me. And so when I met this great group of women through Pilates, that was a significant life change. And so I had been in a relationship as well, which wasn't great, but I decided to take a break from it when I was 38. And that's when I discovered triathlon, because I knew it was going to leave a huge hole in my life without this guy. And I didn't trust myself not to just go back out to the nightlife, because I had been very good at the nightlife in my 20s, but I didn't want to go backwards. So, and I also didn't want to run a marathon right away. And that's how I found triathlon. Living in Los Angeles, there are lots of opportunities. So I had always swam, knew how to ride a bike, and running had long been my happy place. So I just kind of dove into triathlon as a way to occupy my time. It wasn't really about the fitness for me or even winning. It was, in order to train for something like that, you have to have a calendar and daily workouts that you need to accomplish. And I was good at that. I knew from I got into bodybuilding in my 20s, and I knew from that experience that I would set a goal and finish it physically. I have also learned that it's much easier to accomplish physical goals for me than emotional, spiritual growth. That's probably true for all of us. Um, but it was the best outlet for me to use, because it gave me brownie points for my self-esteem, whereas I was used to being seeing myself as a loser and completely incompetent at life. I could accomplish these small goals, and the endorphins obviously made me feel better. But it built up some good self-esteem, just being a badass physically, because inside, like I talked about as a child, I was weak and frightened and fragile. And so this physical badassery countered that, which was very sustaining for me. It was kind of proof that maybe I wasn't really completely right, that I was a loser. Maybe there were there were good things yet to come. And I kept pursuing longer distances, mostly because it would take up more time and keep me busy. And I got back with my boyfriend, and that was good, but I didn't want to be a housewife. So that was another thing that kept me going in triathlon. Um, but I do believe I had to go through the other stuff, because at the beginning of every race, I would cry. I was so anxious and fearful, but I knew this was a positive way to direct it. Whereas in the past, my behavior had been to get high and to go out and to pick up guys. And that was, I believe that was the same thing I was trying to numb, was this fear and anxiety, and finding niches to fit in. And fortunately, being a Pilates instructor and a triathlete are good niche, however you say it, to find. But they're also, as far as endurance sports, it was a good kind of a cocoon. I, I still didn't have skills. I didn't know how to figure out a lot of emotions that I had, the shame, while I had been in straight for 2 years. I I developed a anger problem, and then after that I developed epilepsy, something else to be angry about. And here I found myself in my late 40s, and I was still trying to run it off and numb it off. And that wasn't a bad thing. I'm not complaining, those were good years. But then my significant other, my guy, died suddenly a month before I turned 50, and my body was starting to break down, so I couldn't do the distances. I had built up to doing Ironman, and I never crossed the finish line at Ironman, but just to be able to train. Um, my epilepsy went away. I was able to go off the meds, and it was a huge. Um, I used to love that saying, "What would you do if you knew you could not fail?" And my two things were Ironman and finish my book. So Ironman, I didn't cross the finish line, but I made it there because I was able to go off the epilepsy drugs, and now my body could work that hard. And I needed that for my self confidence, just to go and say I did that. But then he died, and here I was left with myself and my body, my inside self, and my body that could not perform like I wanted it to anymore. And I really thought about giving up, but deep down I knew I couldn't. I just had no idea where to go at 50 to find peace with myself, which was really all I ever wanted. I ended up moving back across the country to be with my family. My parents were now elderly, and it was clear that they needed me around. And that was not what I wanted to do at all, but I did, which really taught me, and partly maybe I did it to prove that I was a good person, that I would stay here. I just felt like that was where I needed to be, was to be there for them. And I talk about building a resume of good. And one of the resume of good things is being there for my parents for those 6, 7 years of the end of their lives. And during that time, someone introduced me to some online self help work. So I dove into that during COVID. COVID to me was prime because I could just focus. This work that I discovered gave me tools. I didn't know how to reprogram the messages I got in straight that I was a piece of shit. I didn't know how to reprogram the shame from a lot of other things I did. I had no idea it was possible to find compassion for myself and give myself a break and figure out what was really hurting that needed to be healed. So, for the past 11 years, I've been working on healing. So, it is definitely not linear, um, kind of a roller coaster, but I like to think of them as sharp curves. Um, and I'm in the best place I've been in my life. I took up scuba diving, and I have a group of supportive friends, and I'm my biggest message is to hang in there till you get to a place where you can heal. It's kind of somebody told me over 20 years ago to stop keeping my light under a barrel, and I've never forgotten it, obviously. And I didn't even know how to do that, how to let myself be okay. And that's one of the things I'm most grateful for, is that I think I'm okay. And and I've created a healthy life for myself.
Healthy life, definitely, Miss Margie, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. Thank you, thank you. So, looking back at the 18-year-old who has dropped at the airport with nothing but her earrings and ticket, what would you want to tell her about what's coming, both the suffering and the salvation?
Hang in there. It's going to be a bumpy ride, but you got this.
A bumpy ride indeed. Well, so you said the movement is medicine and endurance sports can transmute pain into self mastery. For someone listening who is in the middle of their own suffering, whether a trauma, addiction, or just a slow erosion of self, where do they start if they never been an athlete?
Good question. Start out small with baby goals. You can do baby goals inside, doing jumping jacks and sit ups, and setting goals for push ups like prisoners do. Um,
Okay.
you can also get outside and start walking. Running is hard, I get that. But I heard a saying recently that mastery, overcoming myself, is overcoming the biggest obstacle in life. And to me, that's what movement represents, because it often is hard and I fight it mentally. But if I can get past my own mental fight, then I'm going to succeed. I'm going to be moving. I'm going to be, there's, all kinds of scientific evidence of how good it is physiologically to move, and it can really help get out of our heads. They say problem solve, but so just get up and do jumping jacks or sit ups or stretch. You can sit on the floor and spread your legs wide open and just stretch. um, I get immediate relief. Just, with the internet, there's so many tools, exercises to look up. um, I think it's a lot easier these days to find tools and resources than it was anytime previously.
Hmm. Certainly, certainly, Miss Margie, and you spent decades processing this story in your body through movement. What is the difference between processing it through words on page? Were there memories that surface in writing that even Iron Man could not unlock?
Good question, because and I didn't know the answer to that till I finished the book. Um, to weave together a story, I have to find the connecting themes and meaning to hopefully hold a reader's interest throughout the story. And I had to admit to some things that I could, things I could have forgotten. I um I hate this is I had to write the scene of when I was raped when I was 15. It's one thing to remember that that happened to me. It's another thing to put it out in word by word in a way that is not just droll. So I had to revisit a lot of emotions that's the thing about reprogramming and healing is those deep dives I think are necessary. And that's so writing the book really helped me, like you just said, dig deeper than I was able to training for a triathlon. And to come to the end of it, once I finished it, I was, you know, I could not have finished that book anytime sooner in my life because it didn't close till a few years ago.
Very well said, Ms. Margie. Before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people, because my abstract essay is already in sixth season, abstract poetry in third season, and of course my book 101 review in sixth season too, a comedy 101 in fourth season, and my food 101 in sixth season as well. Geography 101 love letters, movie 101 review, on music 101 are on fifth season, Science 101, Sex 101 in its fourth season, and my baby podcast, Trivia 101, Motivation 101, Spiritual Awakening 101, Entrepreneurship 101, Law 101, Mental Health 101, Coaching 101, and of course, Bible Verses 101. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Ms. Margie, tell us, your story includes survival, yes, but also something rare, genuine self acceptance. If you had to define what save your life actually means in the title of your book, what is the difference between being alive and being saved?
Oh, um, I think if I hadn't had the chance to figure out the self-help healing work, I would still be trying to go to work or going to work, trying to make enough money, trying to figure out what I'm supposed to be in this life. And um, living for me has been the healing, the finishing the story, finishing the book, so I can be truly be happy, not just materially, but with how I have evolved.
Very well said, Miss Margie. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your upcoming book?
Yes, my book is The Sufferfest: How Sex, Drugs, and Triathlon Saved My Life. I can't tell you where to find it yet, but I am Margie Allman on all social media. So it's easy to find me, and there I will tell you about publication.
Yes, people, support Miss Margie Allman, because if you support her, for sure, more and more empowering book like this to rise. So, Miss Margie, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
More to come, people. See you soon.